Welcome to the Restoring Our Cities podcast. We are excited to bring you another episode. This is our podcast where we have unfiltered conversations on today's topics that impact our generation. And we are excited to bring you this episode this week where we review your feedback. A few weeks ago, we shared a survey as we've launched season 2, and a lot of you actually shared your comments, feedback, and critiques, and it was really fun to kind of go through it and actually respond to some of those comments. And we appreciate you listening, and we are definitely hearing you, so thank you for all the great feedback and ways that we can improve as well. And so it was fun to kind of jump into the survey results and review that feedback. So we're excited to review that on today's episode, but we also are talking about how life experiences impact our worldview. I think some of the comments from the feedback really stirred that conversation really naturally. And in light of our last episode where we talked about life experiences, the guys wanted to talk through how life experiences really shape our worldview. And so joining me on this episode is Toby Kurien, who brings a lot of great expertise from the marketing world, which really impacted our conversation, as well as Alvin Mathew, who's been a leader at his church for so many years, and he shares a lot of great insight about the biblical worldview as well. And so we jumped into this great conversation that spans social media and just even popular ideas that are happening in our culture today and how it actually frames how we see the world. So we hope you enjoy this episode. Again, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch the video episodes on YouTube, and you can actually hear it on Anchor as well. So feel free to share your comments, follow us on social media, and we hope you enjoyed this week's episode. So let's jump in and take a look at some of the responses. We appreciate everybody just jumping in and sharing your feedback. We asked a couple really generic questions about our podcast. So I just wanted to share some of the feedback that we got. First of all, we did ask, what did you enjoy about the podcast? And we got some pretty cool responses that, first of all, topics chosen were relevant. So I think that was pretty cool.
We're still in the game, boys. We're still relevant to the,
right.
to the youth.
We haven't been canceled yet by the culture.
These old guys are pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like we are teetering on that edge. This other comment said the variety of people's views included, so they love that, the jokes or funny moments, and the way it feels honest and a bit candid rather than strictly structured.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rebels.
Yeah, we are rebels. We didn't put together a 5-point outline or something like that. Another comment said, I like that you guys are doing this podcast, adding another level to rock. The topics are great topics. You guys keep the conversation going and always bring it back if you go off topic. Great job, guys.
Oh, man. Is that just a compliment for you? Because you really listen.
I'm pretty sure my mom wrote that. She knows how to.
I love Joby. He's the best in there.
He's been the best son ever since he was little.
He's the best son.
He's the best son out of all the sons. Another comment said, I like the moderate but diverse viewpoints. It feels like a lot of social media is polarized right now, so I like hearing more leveled commentary.
Nice.
Interesting.
That's good.
Nice.
So yeah, I feel like, and there are some comments in here that I've read ahead of time that kind of go the opposite way too. So it's interesting. There's lots of different feedback. Some other comments about our banter and we get along very well. That's a lie. I mean, yeah. I think we all hate each other.
Yep.
I'm glad it shows. We are masking it, right?
That's why we have to be separated.
Yeah. we can't record in the same room.
We're in the same room. We start.
I never really started
fighting
talking to Toby.
Yep.
I never really started talking to Toby until he moved to New York.
Oh, he's gone now. Oh, yeah, okay.
I couldn't stand him when we were in close proximity. It had to take a pandemic for us to talk regularly. But I do want to share some of the feedback that we asked where we shared the question, what are some ways that we can improve? So great comments here. One, having speakers who are well-educated in chosen topics, people on both sides of the viewpoint. So interesting comment. Make it a bit more educational so that people are learning something new every time they listen. That's interesting comment as well. And here's a longer comment. It says, since improve is a relative term for something like this, I'm going to write what I don't like. Although your topics are great topics and relevant to their current climate, I don't hear a Christian viewpoint from you guys on these topics.
Ouch.
It seems like you guys are saying all the right things a Christian would say, but not sharing a biblical viewpoint on these matters. To me, you sound like everyone else. The Christian needs to be a voice, not like anyone else. I'm not saying what you guys are sharing is correct or incorrect. I'm saying there's no Christian views expressed. Saying that's the Christian thing to do is not sharing a Christian viewpoint. So
That's interesting.
Yeah. Thoughts, guys?
Sinners.
Yeah.
all of us are sinners.
No, I think no, that's a really good comment. But I think Joby, you and I and Sibby, when on the first podcast, I think we kind of like I think we decided for the first, like, to kind of get into things, we decided to just kind of like go from like the cultural perspective rather than, you know, our own individual faiths. And I mean, I don't think we ever said, let's not do it, you know, but I think it was just something that we wanted to kind of like get into after really understanding it from the cultural standpoint. I don't know. Maybe that's, you know, that's not what they want to hear, but.
Well, no, I think it's a good viewpoint because I think there are some comments. I'm just thinking back to other episodes where we have shared, hey, like that might not be the Christian thing to do. We might have, you know, shared that phrase, right? And so I think we need to back that up and maybe explain it sometimes.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, I think also there's like I think we talked about it earlier where there's polarizing views, and especially even within like Christianity, there's like technically two polarized views of like what the Christian thing to do is. You know, someone will be like, oh, the Christian thing to do is to pursue social justice and to, you know, become very concerned about social matters. And then the other side of that Christian framework would be, oh, but we should view everything through the lens of the gospel, and it's more important to preach than to really care about social justice issues. And once you preach, you'll get the social justice issues, you know. I think there was that debate between like Martin Luther King, and I think there's a quote where he said like it, you know, people kept telling him just like, you're a preacher, just shut up and preach. You know, like almost the LeBron saying, right? Like, shut up and play basketball. It's like, shut up and just preach the gospel. And I think his response is like, well, yeah, but that's not enough. It has to be kind of both. So for us, I think we're probably leaning more on the, none of us are pastors except for Joel, of, hey, I'm not gonna, you know, be a spiritual authority here and try to, you know, speak on something that I might not necessarily have the knowledge or wisdom to, and maybe defer to Joel. But I do appreciate that a little bit because I'm trying to listen to more speakers who are speaking from a Christian worldview, specifically to these topics, because unfortunately, like, it's not just preach the gospel and everything else will work, or it's not just pursue social justice. It's actually something completely unique. That's the Christian worldview, you know? And I think we are pursuing that, but maybe not trying to blatantly outright say it.
Yeah.
But I think we could if we needed to, but it will clearly be a unique proposition or position.
It's a really good conversation I think that we should have though, as well, just talking about like our perspective. And I think we can get into that in a little bit. I do want to share a couple other comments where one person mentioned, have different people who do not have a collective of the same opinion. It seems like there are no conservatives in your group.
Ouch. Wow. Really?
Whoa.
I was afraid people were going to say we're too conservative.
Really?
Really?
It's interesting, right? That's a great comment. Thank you for sharing the feedback. That one did catch me as well because I'm like, oh, wow, that's a really interesting take because I think we had a couple comments before that said, hey, you have very varying viewpoints or it's very non-polarizing. And then, you know, it seems like there's a collective of one opinion. What do you guys think about that?
That's interesting.
That is super interesting. But I mean, I kind of go back to what we're about, you know? I don't think we're really trying to like push a message of conservative or liberal or and this is one of the reasons I wanted to join the podcast too, is just kind of like save from like what's you know, right, you know, what would be the right thing to do, and of course like everybody can argue against that and say, you know, what is right then, you know, and you know, challenging me on that. But like, you know, there's a common decency to look at things from both points of, you know, point of view, and and kind of decipher like, okay, I understand what they're talking about, or I understand what they're talking about, and kind of like agree upon what's more important, or what's more important, really.
Yeah, I think we can get really deep into that too, because one of the first things that I thought about when I saw some of the comments about, oh, there's no conservatism in your group, because I think there's another comment in here as well, because we asked about what are some topics that you like to hear discussed. And one person said conservatives being attacked and conservatives being deplatformed and silenced. Some other comment said, keep doing what you're doing.
Okay.
But there's a interesting kind of just theme there where maybe people hear these things about social justice and just think that they're liberal topics and almost put it in that category. Where isn't that kind of dangerous? I think, for my opinion.
Yeah, that's definitely dangerous.
Yeah, of course.
If you stick your hand in fire, is that dangerous? I don't know.
Will you not?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, how? I guess I don't. I guess I don't understand. But like, how can it be just a liberal point of view? And again, like that's what's been like shown. Again, this is why we need podcasts like this. So it doesn't have to be a liberal point of view. It's a human point of view. It's going to it's a teaching of Christ's point of view. So I think it's not just a liberal. I think it should be just everyone.
Yeah. And I think that might be sometimes a perception, and maybe that's where like not only our audience and listeners maybe start to hear this and get educated, but also we start to learn things as well. And so, I thought that was an interesting comment. And so, let me make that clear. When we talk about these things, we're not like just saying, hey, this is like our liberal point of view or conservative point of view. We're really just talking about these issues.
Yeah. So the question was like, they framed it that the conservative viewpoint was getting kind of shut down, right? Mm-hmm. And I think like one thing I've learned, at least especially in like social media, is like, if you look at Twitter and like I'll say like the theme of Twitter is a lot more like liberal slant of like what's I don't want to say the platform is, but like what's pushed on the platform, right? Mm-hmm. So on Facebook, it's kind of both. You get real far left and real far right are pushed on your social media. So for instance, I have like, there's 2 guys on Facebook I know that are on my Facebook. They're both good guys, but are both completely in opposite like political viewpoints. And guaranteed every day I will see at least 4 or 5 posts from each of them.
Oh, I have a guess.
I know. Like, every day I see 4 or 5 posts from each of them. And I'm like, are they the only people on Facebook that are posting? Or is it like Facebook is strategically pushing like this, like, I don't want to say us versus them, but like a polarized agenda.
Okay, so that goes back to Facebook's algorithm, though.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I'm not.
So the more you click on a certain topic, the type of news you get is filtered with that algorithm. That's 100% fact. That's not like a conspiracy. Like it's all like that's a digital marketing thing. Like,
but I think the problem is I don't like subscribe to either, so I'm getting like flooded with both.
Yeah, but I think then it has to do with like you like actually seeing if they are actually like what their comments are.
I read every. That's the problem.
Those kind of things is again the algorithm. That's So Facebook thinks you're really interested. What it is, it just says these 2 dudes are going at it all the time.
They're going at it. Like, man, I'm like, wait, what's his response? Okay, cool. like
episode 14.
Right. Well, you see, really timely comment on that. Have you guys seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix?
I heard people talking about it.
Yeah, same.
We watched it just last night. And it's stuff that, I kind of delve into some marketing stuff at work too. Toby, you're the expert in this area too. And I think this is a hugely important topic, but exactly what Toby explained, they outline it in The Social Dilemma. Because as you engage with the posts, Facebook's algorithm is going to identify what you do to keep you on the screen, right? To keep you scrolling and to keep you engaged, because guess what? Now the advertisement dollars can work, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they shared a great example about like, depending on where you are in the country, when you type into Google what a climate change is, and then the pre-populated answers in the search option is different depending on where you are in the country and based on your
Wow, I didn't know that.
activity,
Yeah, that's
right?
intense.
Like it'll say climate change is a hoax if you are in a certain area of the country, like as the potential
Oh, wow.
search options, right? So I think what we click on, and maybe that's a comment to our listeners, everybody, because you can hear the variety of feedback. I think we have listeners from all over. Just looking at some of the analytics, we have listeners all over the country, from California to Michigan to Tennessee to New York and like Florida. It seems like they're all over the country, but also in India. It seems like that's a given. And some different
scammers are looking at our podcast.
Ireland. I don't know where Ireland. Who's that listener in Ireland? But thank you for listening. But you can hear the variance between feedback. So check your social media. Do you guys see themes in your social media, or you have to be a little bit diverse like Alvin and click on everybody's posts?
Yeah,
so
click on everything.
Diverse.
Read it all.
You gotta put comments like, I like this, I like that.
This is cool.
This
Like,
is
yes.
this is cool. Yes.
But it's interesting. I feel like we could do a whole episode on that. Movies, I would watch it. It's like a documentary, but they kind of make it entertaining and put a story along with it. But
I heard the acting is terrible. That's one of the.
Oh, it's not a
comments I heard.
documentary?
It is a documentary. It's all like tech leaders from Google, Pinterest, Twitter, everybody, and they kind of just talk about how they built some of this stuff, but also how it is making our country very polarized.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So yeah,
This is one of the most this is one of the roots of this problem that's nobody's talking about.
Mhm.
Because when you hear about social media and how they're generating news and blah blah, it's always like it's always like, oh yeah, fake news, Russia, these themes, that has nothing to do with the real cause, which is algorithms basically telling you what you like. Because just because you clicked on one thing, it thinks that, okay, this is what they want to see. So they filter it and filter it and filter it to a point where you're just only seeing what you're liking and clicking. And again, I say that liking and clicking because it might not be even something that's you agree with. It's just something that's almost sometimes entertainment or engage with. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's such a root of this cause that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, it's really, and I think that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this today, especially about our worldview and like how do we perceive things, because we're a little bit older, as we've kind of alluded to on this podcast. We're a little bit older, where I think all of us were, either in high school, college, right when like Facebook started and social media started. It's not like it's always been around in our lives. We kind of were very cognizant and aware of when it launched, right? And we've seen it evolve over time. But there's probably a lot of young listeners, which, I want to just deviate and say that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this podcast. I mean, I think personally for me, because I see some toxic comments on social media, and I'm like, man, it's just young people who might not be.
Yeah, just don't get it.
They just don't just not get a point of view, but they might not know how to decipher and filter out information.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that's just like being young. It's not even.
We're that way in some other aspect.
All of us, 100% all of us.
Yeah, that's true. I don't want to just portray it on like I'm being ageist or
how dare you,
whatever that is. But it's in a vein of maybe it's just learning how to decipher information and knowing that everything that you see in your feed might be tailored for you based on what you're engaging in. You might not be able to see varying viewpoints.
True.
Some topics that folks mentioned that they want to hear is like mental health, current events, advancements in science, health and modern technology, and the ethical Christian moral perspective that goes along with those.
Ooh,
practical spiritual applications to today's world. That's really interesting.
Somebody's reading a lot of apologetics and Ravisek, right? Like that's a heavy topic.
Even just like the health and sciences part of that. I think that's really interesting. I was joking about Joe Rogan, but I was listening to his podcast with Elon Musk and the Neuralink.
Yeah.
Planning on inserting into people's brains, and he's like, yeah, in 5 years, I feel like we can get
Yeah. Musk is super smart, but some of his predictions
Are
like
not
5 years.
yeah.
And get this, according to that podcast, in 10 years, we don't even have to talk to each other. We can just like X-Men, like Dr. X or Professor X, mentally.
Heck yeah.
Alvin, are you available for the podcast?
I'm getting some revelation vibes here, guys.
My spidey sense is tingling.
The revelation.
Professor X, if you can talk to people from your mind, why can't you just fix your legs? That's why I just didn't get.
Right.
So, no, I appreciate everybody sharing their feedback in the survey. And please share your comments. I think I've gotten a lot of direct messages. I'm sure we've talked to friends and family who've shared feedback on the podcast. So we just appreciate kind of you guys actually hearing. I really thought it was just my mom who accidentally hit repeat on Spotify or something, and then it just played 400 times.
Heck yeah. We have 400 listens?
We more than that by now. So and that's just like through some of the analytics, but I know that's still relatively small, but that's still pretty. That's pretty cool. Cool to hear and across the country too. So we appreciate you listening.
Does the audience level go up when Sibby's not on the podcast?
Yeah. I noticed that too. Depending on who's on the podcast.
Right.
Sorry.
They like preemptively can tell.
Yeah, it's like you can see the drop off. People actually unsubscribe.
Yeah, and then they resubscribe.
As soon as he starts talking,
they resubscribe when somebody. That's funny.
It's great because he's not here. He can't
even
defend himself.
He's gonna hear back. He's like, "What the heck?" How did I say that?
I'm keeping that part.
We should have a segment, like a 5-minute segment of just like roasting someone who's not on.
Who's not on the podcast
today? We'll spend the whole episode, 90% of it, talking about how we should love each other and how we should really care about and do positive things. But then 10% is just roasting. There is one topic here that said they would like to hear more about our life experiences in careers, friends, family, church, marriage, etc.
Oh, wow.
So that was an interesting comment that I heard. And I think that kind of relates to more of the topic that I wanted to talk with you guys today about our life experiences. Not that we have to go into all of our life histories and backstories, but given today's climate, especially in societal issues that are happening right now, racial tension, police brutality, however you want to coin it, there's been this like overwhelming, need to hear life experiences from people, especially who have been going through a lot of issues. And I've been reading a lot about, worldviews and frameworks and things like that, and where life experiences, I think we need to hear people's life experiences. But I wanted to ask the question, how does your life experience impact your perspective and your worldview? Because I think that's really influencing, I guess, the framework and how we look at things, especially if, you're a person of color, or you've been given quote unquote privileged life, or whatever it is, however you define that. Sometimes that kind of shapes how you view the world, right? Do you think that's a fair statement, or what do you guys think about life experiences and how it impacts?
So I'm kind of a student of Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, like one of those books that I read that really like impacted the way I thought about things. So one of the things that he talks about is just this right here. There's certain events in your life that shapes who you are, and sometimes that even leads to you as an individual becoming really good at something, Mm-hmm. That's a whole different topic, but like I think what I'm trying to say is life experiences definitely like show you a perspective from the other side, from the other person's shoe. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So for example, like people want to hear about our life experiences. I grew up in the inner city for a majority of my life, Mm-hmm. So I had friends who were all sorts of, people. So when I hear like a certain person complaining or like saying like, like I had this traumatic experience, I understand because I've seen some of those things happen to my buddies, you know. So yeah, definitely, like life experiences definitely changes a person and how they think about these things. And it's kind of sad because sometimes that person that doesn't understand, you know, these things, it's almost like there's almost no way of getting through to them. You get what you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that kind of, or maybe it's just like a lot harder to get it through them because they just can't see it from the other side, the other person's, you know, from the other person's shoes.
Yeah. That's, I think it's really fair to say. Alvin, like, how do you feel that's maybe impacted your life, just your life experiences, and how does it maybe shape your view of the world?
Yeah, I think it's like incredibly significant. Life experience really kind of details like our, I mean, essentially it details our worldview, right? So, for instance, like a lot of us, like I know me and Joby grew up down the street from each other, right? So there's a lot of similarity in our experience. But if I compare that with like even other people from, like you know, I knew from like childhood, like or even from my church who grew up in a different circumstance, just even the way that they approach things is like kind of different. I had a coworker who like is about maybe 10 or 15 years older than me, and I found out that he grew up in like the more not as wealthy suburb I was like born in, and you know, but like 20 years earlier than I was there. And he was telling me like, "Oh, this is what it used to be like," and I'm telling him, "Oh yeah, now like the neighborhood totally changed and it was way different. Like that's why we left." And he's like, "Oh, it frames how we like perceive the world." And I think that especially like, I think there was like a saying that said like a healthy church is one where not everyone is like the same demographic, because you're going to immediately think the same, you're going to immediately react the same to things, and it like broadens your perspective to how you do anything, right? I mean, even use that in the workplace, like a team. Any like effective team isn't just the same kind of person. You have someone who's strong in one area and someone who's strong in a different area, and then having that like varied viewpoints or interpretation of like a situation helps you kind of get a better understanding or like a breadth of the whole situation, right? So I think for us, like life experience, I think it's a good idea to like talk to people with way different life experiences, but then understanding that like, oh, like for instance, you know, if I grew up in a two parent household, it's a given to me that I think, oh, that's kind of the norm. Versus for some kids, they're like, oh no, divorce is the norm because they may have grown up in that. Or maybe someone's like, oh, I didn't even have parents. You know, like it could have been anything. But that shapes how we react to things. And I mean, you can go in a spiritual slant on all that too, but it's, you know, it definitely is a significant influence, I think, in
Yeah,
our lives.
I think it definitely impacts. But like you even mentioned some really significant things there, Alvin, about like our worldview. And the reason why I wanted to even bring this up is because, you know, as we talk to people, especially on this podcast, and, you know, even though, even just looking at some of the feedback, I don't think I'll just speak for myself and you guys can disagree or agree, but I don't agree with every single thing that I hear on the podcast. And maybe every single notion or comment that a guest may share, but I want to hear it and I want to listen. And sometimes it sounds like I'm speaking out of both sides out of my mouth because like I'm, you know, trying to hear different opinions and I can understand it. But the more I read about, you know, like a Christian worldview, it isn't a liberal or conservative viewpoint. Like I try to put everything in like my Christian worldview perspective because I want to share this comment. I've been reading one of an apologetic. His name is Neil Shenvi, Indian American guy, and he shared like some really interesting comments about like the Black Lives Matter movement, and he does a lot of writing on critical race theory, which is he kind of argues it as a worldview about how society is really just built two groups: people who oppress and then people who are oppressed. And that's just kind of how you look at the world. And every way that you look at the world in our society is there's an oppressor and then there's people who are oppressed. And he kind of argues that that's not super healthy. And I want to share some of these comments that he speaks because lived experience is one of those tenets that are kind of really first and foremost in this like critical race theory. And I would really encourage our listeners, especially if you are really interested in like the social justice movement, like really start to learn, because a lot of the, I guess, ideas behind it, I'm not going to just say, hey, it's all critical race theory or all this kind of stuff. There are ideas in these concepts are coming from these theories that are very popular in our culture today. So I want to share this one comment he says about lived experience. There are claims in our society that we should never challenge someone's lived experience, right? For example, if a black man says, as a black man, I know that society is racist.
Oh, right. Yeah, I've heard that
right?
before.
That's a statement that someone can make based on their lived experience. He also uses another example. Maybe a Hindu person can say, as a Hindu, I know all paths lead to God.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be a kind of statement about lived experience. But like in our society, you know,
you wouldn't touch that.
You don't want to attack somebody because, hey, that's their experience, right? Like, especially in this world that we live in, there's just a lot of talk about, hey, only people of color know what it feels like to be oppressed. And we can't challenge that notion because that's their experience. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like we live in a society where we can't challenge that. But some of those comments that I just stated as examples, would you challenge that to like maybe the person who's Hindu, right? Like, well, I believe in Jesus. I don't think that all paths lead to God. But how can I criticize somebody based on their lived experience?
That's interesting. I actually like the way you said that because it reminded me of a familiar saying that like when you said like that's my lived experience. If you change out lived experience for it, that's my truth. And I don't know if you heard that, but especially in apologetics, that's a big thing that comes up. Is that like, is truth relative or is truth, absolute? And then so theoretically, should we ask, is lived experience relative or is it absolute? And that would probably be a way deeper conversation that we're very prepared to go to right now. But but I think in a lot of ways, like especially speaking to like that statement from like a supposed Hindu, all ways lead to God. Okay, then I wouldn't say we'd criticize it. I'd say, okay, well, let's like objectively analyze that statement. And that's probably any kind of, whether Christian apologetic, any kind of apologetic is, okay, well, let's actually investigate. Is there a basis to this or not? And I think we're afraid to do that because we've been kind of trained that, like, let's not talk religion, let's not talk politics. You believe what you want, I believe what I want. Okay, and we'll just... And I think that's kind of led to a lot of this, like, I don't want to use the word immaturity, but maybe inexperience of, like, dealing with these issues, right? There's a great apologist who's a little bit old, like a couple generations older, that's long gone, but his name is Francis Schaeffer, and he was like basically a phenomenally intelligent man, and he had a saying where he never wanted to debate someone. He wanted to discuss ideas and completely disagree with them, but be able to then take them out to dinner right after. And I was like, oh wow, maybe that's the approach as a Christian. Is we should be like, I should wholeheartedly stand for that, even if I'm completely disagreeing with you. But at the same time, it should be done in a way of where, like, I don't want to use the word criticizing like it's a bad thing, but like, I'm critical of you or something,
Yeah. I wanted to bring up that conversation because, I don't want it to seem like, as someone shares their lived experience and we hear from people who have lived experiences, I think there's value, just like all of us have grown up in, our neighborhoods and communities. There's value in the experiences. Like, I got bullied in school. I mean, I was just talking to Jen. I mean, in grade school and high school, they called me Dr. Habib on the bus every day.
At least it was creative.
Yeah.
At least it wasn't like, hey, Gandhi. It's like, that's a person.
Right.
You're a Hindu. That's a religion. All right.
Not only did they give me a title of doctor because I was Indian, but they also gave me the name.
They gave him a name.
Yeah. But, it really it forced me to sit, in the front of the bus, and I couldn't go to the back of the bus because after all the kids would tease me and all that kind of things. And this would happen every single day. And it really I find it hilarious when people say, you're such an extrovert. You talk so much. I'm like, you should see me in high school. I was very quiet. And in some avenues, I still am. And
is this true, Alvin?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I even talked to you when you were in high school in reality, right?
I wasn't talking to anyone. I mean,
Yeah, he wasn't talking to anybody.
But you know, it's one of those things where, like, my lived experience. But when I start to force that on, like, all white people are horrible because they called me Dr. Habib.
Right, yeah, that would be wrong.
Yeah, that would be wrong.
You know what? And the reason why I want to bring that up is because there is a lot of that happening in our society, and it's kind of stemming from these ideas in critical race theory. I want to share this quote that I saw on Twitter, actually, from Ibram X. Kendi. He actually wrote the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is the #1 best-selling. So these ideas that I'm talking about are not fringe, crazy conspiracy theorist people. These are the really predominant people. He was interviewed on Oprah, and #1 best-selling book on, like, Amazon and everything, right? And he shared this thought. Some white colonizers adopted black children. They civilized these savage children in their superior ways of white people while using them as props in their lifelong pictures of denial, while cutting the biological parents of these children out of the picture of humanity. So he's basically challenging the idea of white parents who have adopted children maybe impacting their lived experience.
Interesting.
Because they're depriving them of their culture or whatnot. That's a pretty broad statement.
Yeah.
I mean, then you have to think, what's better for the kid? You know, was there another option? Was this the only option? You know, you have to, because at the end of the day, did the kid have a better life this way? That's something you have to consider too. You know, that's loaded.
It's very loaded.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to, like, just throw this on you. The reason and the bigger idea is, even Toby, you just mentioned it. It's like, oh, we have to look at some of these circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. But isn't, like, this idea perpetuating in our society where, like, hey, my experience tells me that all people are bad.
Yeah.
All police are like this, or all, you know, and I'm not disputing some of those things. I think
do you think that's everyone though? But do you think that's, like, I feel like that's the fringe group. Those are the outliers that you know. I think, I mean, I know the way the country looks, it seems like it's the majority. But again, it kind of goes back to the, you know, certain things that are put together in the system. You know, going back to the social media stuff we talked about earlier.
It's complicated, right? It's not just like, hey, everybody is in groupthink and they think this way. But I think there are ideas, and that's why I would encourage, and I'm not trying to push anybody any one way, I would say start to read the ideas of, like, critical race theory, but then also try to read it from, you know, obviously as a Christian, I would say read it from a Christian perspective, because I'll just personally tell you, I don't subscribe to that because I feel like it's really dangerous, because it does shape you into a worldview, right? It kind of tells you what is morality. This is what it should be. Like, I don't see everybody as oppressors. No. I don't think all other people are oppressed. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. But that doesn't, I have to be very delicate in saying this too, but, like, there are aspects of these things which I'd really encourage everybody to, like, kind of read up on Neil Shenvi, and he's a Christian apologetic, but he doesn't discount racism. He thinks that, you know, there are lived experiences that we should read and listen and hear from our fellow brothers and sisters, but we shouldn't adopt that as, like, our world, right? Yeah. One of the things he said is, you may want to reject some claims and accept some, but we should always interpret lived experiences, and we know our interpretations can be fallible. So we should always test our interpretations against the objective reality and through scripture. It's like, hear what people are saying, hear what people are going through, because it's real, it's true. Mm-hmm. But also take that and apply it to scripture. And, like, let the Bible dictate like how we should be looking at these issues, because it talks a lot about justice and how we should be approaching social justice. So yeah, I thought that was just kind of interesting for us to kind of talk through.
Is it to start a podcast and be, like, super moderate about everything? That's one of the things.
That is the result. You know, I don't really care. I'm very apathetic about everything. No, I feel like we definitely have to, like, and, like, there's so much, you can't ignore what's going on in the world. Yeah. That's like, I don't know, subscribe to the thing. And I don't think even from a Christian perspective, you can ignore what's going on in the world.
No,
Right?
no, definitely not. I think we're past that point where we can say we can ignore it. I think a large majority, and I mean very large majority, has, kind of accepted the fact that you can't ignore this. This is a big, big deal,
One of the things that came to my mind was when we're like determining like, okay, like is this statement valid or not valid? We also have to consider like the perspective of the person saying the statement. So for instance, like especially like the word colonizers, I remember I had a bunch of like friends who were like from African. And they'll throw on the word like colonizers like all the time because that's a typical thing, and from their experience, oh yeah, that's a way bigger deal, like a colonizer. Versus in America, a colonizer, like, what do you mean colonizers? We're America. We got rid of the colonizers, like in that sense. I think you have to really, when you're interpreting a statement, also view like the perspective of the person making the statement. And like, anytime you interpret, like, I mean, I do this with like Bible studies and stuff, or like commentaries. I've had, when I'm like doing question and answers for kids, and they ask a question and say, oh, well, this person said this. And like, do you agree or not agree? And I'm like, well, I can agree with this, but knowing that this is the background they come from, that makes me kind of more like well-rounded, understand what they're saying.
Yeah. That's a great point. I feel like we need to define our terms a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there's this phrase, and I think this author, his title of his book is "How to Be Anti-Racist." On face value, it's like anti-racist, of course. Like anybody talking about even social justice or systemic racism, like of course, those are good things, right? But then as you see the way people define terms, like it's not good enough to be not racist. You have to be anti-racist, which means everybody's inherently racist. You have to work to not be racist.
Right. That racism is the status quo.
Yeah. And I don't know how I feel about that. How does these thoughts and ideas shape our worldview? Not to say like, all right, well, that means I'm completely against the movement of social justice. No, I think we have to look at history. We have to look at lived experiences. But I would challenge all of our people listening, and I would challenge ourselves, and challenging myself. And that's why I wanted to read a lot more over the past couple weeks to really understand when I say things like social justice, what do I mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Or privilege, what does that really mean? And some of these ideas, not to say that we're always subscribing, and maybe it's a response to some folks who might think, oh, this is a liberal or conservative point of view. It's not. It's really just talking about the topics and then understanding how we view it. So,
thanks for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, please follow us on social media at Restoring Our City. And you can like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, wherever you find your podcasts. So let us know, share reviews on Apple Podcasts. That really helps us out as well. And so we are looking forward to engaging in the dialogue with you guys. So thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you on our next episode.